bag when you were young. As a little saying we used to say, where you go and hide and go seek, where you go to the tree and you put your hands on your head and you say, ready or not, here I come. Well, that's what this is about. Jesus Christ, when things get to a point, he's going to turn around and say, ready or not, here I come, and there'll be nothing you can do. He's just going to say, whoa. So when you examine yourself, when Christ comes, it's ready or not, here I come. He's not going to say, are you ready? And are you ready? Oops, he's not ready. We have to wait. And remember, if he turns around before you're ready, he can take the tree and you're it or whatever. So again, this little games that I thought of, and everything, it always breaks down in some form or another. But as I said, for Passover, you're supposed to examine yourselves. And I'll do more reading this time than I normally do. Just remember what God says. Amos 3:7. He says he will do nothing unless he warns his servants, the prophets, first. Whether you get the message or not, but he does give a warning, whether you're the one that receives it or not. And I would go to Philippians 4:19. Philippians 4:19 says, but my God shall supply all your needs according to his riches and glory by Jesus Christ. So God's going to supply our needs. So wherever you are, my suggestion about how to examine yourself, each person is at a different level. And I would suggest that you read the various books like Proverbs. Just examine yourself as you read the different Proverbs. I thought about one the other day where this guy always, the one that always, every time he sees me, what? You said there's no smoking in heaven? And so you answer a fool according to his folly. If you do that, you're going to be like he is. Or you don't answer a fool according to his folly. At least he'll be wise in his own conceit. I told you so. So either way, it's almost the same answer. But again, according to the individual. So Proverbs, Psalms, Ecclesiastes, and parts of Job give wisdom on how you are for yourself. How do you examine yourself? I think about Job. Let's see if I can find the right one now. Job 14:1. What did Job say? Let me find it here. If you're thinking about how to examine yourself, Job 14:1. Man that is born of a woman is of a few days and full of trouble. So God says there are going to be trials. And he says, like the wind. It's going to be over just like you know it. I know I used to not argue, but a person used to be upset by God not killing David right away for having Uriah put at the front of the battle. I had to remind him, guess what? David's dead now. So is Uriah. Because God didn't punish him the way you thought he should have. God is just. He was angry at God because God didn't just strike down David immediately, but God looks on the heart, not on one particular act and so forth. So all things continue as they are. So I also think about God's admonition. Revelation 22:10-12. And this is very good for the last days. When you see what they're doing with the same-sex marriage and all this. Revelation 22, starting verse 10, it says, and he said unto me, seal not the sayings of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand. He that is unjust, let him be unjust still. He that which is filthy, let him be filthy still. He that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. So God says, you're not going to change things. Says, so when you examine yourself, think about it. And then I think about what Job said when we got to Job 14:14. Job said, all my appointed days, I wait till my change comes. I'll read it so I don't misquote it. If a man die, shall he live again? All the days of my appointed time will I wait till my change comes. So Job is dead, but he knew there was a change coming, a resurrection coming. So again, as you examine yourself, just know where you are. Everybody is at a different level in your particular life. And he said, of course, that we're but a breath. In Job 7:7, again, when you examine it, indicates who you are. Job 7:7. Oh, remember that my life is wind, and I shall no more see God. So God, it says you get up and you go to bed, you get up and you go to bed. It just seems like it just goes on and on and on and on. So God's reward is with him when he comes. So again, I think about the different admonitions, and you watch in the light of the world news what's going on. Like I said, the time clock has already been set. The hour, the day, the month, the year, all that's been set. And like I said, when Christ said, as he turned around and said, ready or not, we turned around, here I come. When he's coming, it's too late to get it together then. You need it together as you're able. So each person examines himself. And as I said, those particular books, now I have at home a DVD or CD, whatever you want to call it, of the complete Bible. And I'll just listen to the entire book of Proverbs. And I'll listen to the entire book of Psalms and Ecclesiastes. And listen to them 2 or 3 times. Sometimes I just spend a whole day or so just listening to them 2 or 3 times. And you'd be surprised how much you just realize, what did I do? Somebody gave me somebody may be upset. You learn this, as they say, be angry and sin not. If you get angry about something, it's no need for you to make a mistake because they said something you didn't like. So again, read those in mind with where are you? So this is a time for examining yourselves, wherever you are. And there's another little scripture I want to read. Ecclesiastes, I found it. And it really, well, before that, leavening, not just the physical leavening, not just the baking soda, but examine yourself. What's your mental attitude? Somebody makes you upset, the driver cuts you off, that sort of thing, and so forth. People tend to get upset and so forth. Remember, God will supply your needs. He will give you, and after you read, you pray about it. Various things of that sort. So each one is at his own level. There's one more I want to really get to, if I can find it here without... it's in Ecclesiastes. I just have to look for it here right now. Where it says, there is a time for everything under the sun. Okay, Ecclesiastes 3. And I'm going to read some of these, and again, you know where you are. I think I know where I am. And if you're like me, I need help. And just think about those who are without the help of God's Spirit, and who haven't read the Proverbs and so forth. Think about, and the Psalms, David, now he didn't write them all. He had a psalmist and others who helped, but there were 150 Psalms. About every little thing, David always gave God praise. And when you read them, and when you listen to them again, and there are bits of wisdom here, like when he told Job, where were you when I, told the ocean, you go this far and no further. So think about this, where were you when God decided to make you? And like I always told my classes when I was teaching, it would, even there in Alabama, I said the same thing down there, and it worked down there. I had an equally divided class: 4 white boys, 4 white girls, 4 black boys, 4 black girls. And before I got there, the parents were squaring off in the parking lot. It was kind of neighborhood school, and the parents were fighting each other. The kids sitting back there, almost enjoying it all. But I said, wait a minute, think about this. How many of you had anything to say about who your parents are or who you are? And believe it or not, within a week it all stopped because they had no answer to that. So God says, when you examine yourself and see who you are, what did you have to say about it? Absolutely nothing. So again, and I'll end with this because I can go on there. There are lots of other things I could add to this, but when you examine yourselves, and I'll just give you the two scriptures you can look them up later if you want. 1 Corinthians 11, 28 to 31, where it says examine yourself, and 2 Corinthians 13, 5 through 8 says to examine yourselves. But just remember this when you're examining yourselves. What does it say? It says, to everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down, a time to build up, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance. And of course, as you read these, you think about David dancing and his wife despised him for dancing and so forth. You know, and I think about this minister, I'm not going to call his name, on TV, the one that's crying all the time. Every time you see him, he's always crying. He plays the piano and this sort of thing. But you don't want to be overly happy and you don't want to be overly sad. But this one minister, and I'll tell you who it is if you want to know later, but it looks like he's just so sad. He's always crying, you know, he's so spiritual. He's always crying, you know, I'm so spiritual, you know, God is this, that. But anyway, you don't want to be too far either way. You want to have a good balance. So, as it goes on, it says in verse 11, he has made everything beautiful in his name. Also, he has set the world in their heart, so that no man can find out the work that God makes from the beginning to the end. So God already knows. And you go down, you get lots of other things. If you read all the way down to 20, all go into one place, all are full of dust, and all turn to dust again. Who knows the spirit of man that goes upward, and the spirit of the beast that goes downward to the earth? Wherefore I perceive that there is nothing better than a man should rejoice in his own works, for that it is his portion. For who shall bring him to see what shall be after him? God will. So again, God says if you have some things that you enjoy, he says enjoy it. It's given to you to enjoy. And don't be mournful and all this thing. There's a time. There are times when you're going to be up. There are times you're going to be down. But just know all that God is in charge, and he will supply all your needs.
Well, we've been going through the book of Daniel. So today we are going to go through Daniel chapter 3. Daniel chapter 3 and verse 1 says, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Now there is disagreement as to what this image was. Some say it was a statue of himself, and they've done some archaeological digs and they've found some statues. They found some pedestals with a statue on it. And so they're thinking, well, maybe he did a statue of himself. And others say it's an Ashtoreth because it is out of proportion. In other words, you know, you get an idea of the size. You get confused when you think of cubics, just think of feet. It's 60 feet tall, 6 stories tall, and it's only 6 feet wide. That's really out of proportion, isn't it? So that's why they think it was probably a Dr. Bollinger believes it was an Asherah, which is, what the children of Israel were doing when they went out in the groves and the trees, and they cut all the limbs, and they fashioned the trees, and they worshiped them. So there's this disagreement as to what it is. It's hard to imagine somebody making a statue of himself that's, 6 feet by 60 feet, but just doesn't sound, it'd blow over in the wind, wouldn't it? So, if it was a statue or something. So there had to be some way that was rounded or grounded. And this is, chapter 3 takes place about 19 years after chapter 2. So there's this big gap, almost 20 years. So David is now 37 years old, and his companions a year or two younger, so they're in their mid-30s. And King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather together the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So he sends out word to all over the province to gather all the officials together for the big dedication ceremony. So the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered together for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood there before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So he sends out the word. All the dignitaries, the big shots, get all the word, right? They all come back to Babylon, and they're all standing around this image for dedication ceremony. And then they hear this, verse 4. Then a herald cried aloud, a town crier, cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, the psaltery, and symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace." So at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, and symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So he gathers them all together for a big dedication ceremony, and then he pulls the big surprise. Okay, now when you hear the sound of all the music, you will bow down and you will worship this image that I put up here, or you will be cast into a burning fiery furnace. Those are your options. So, of course, what did they do? They all fell down and worshiped. Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. They spoke and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, psaltery, and symphony with all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the gold image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have set up over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not paid due regard to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image which you have set up." Now it's not clear if only the leaders showed up for the ceremony, but that's the way it's written. They sent word and to all the officials, all the ones that you read, magistrates, they're all officials, and it says and all the officials. So it's like just the officials, the heads of everyone, the heads of all the departments were there. And of course they were from all different languages and nations and whatnot. So it's not showed exactly clear, but that's what it sounds like. Or if all the people showed up locally. So it's not clear. If all the other Jews were there, and they fell down and worshiped. Because it only mentions Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And if you remember back in chapter 1, when they gave them the diet, there was just the 4 of them that refused the diet. So it leads you to assume that all the other Jews went along with it. You know, whatever you say, you're the boss, we'll go along with it. We ain't making waves. But Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you know, says, no, you know, give us vegetables. Try us out on vegetables. We don't want to take the king's delicacies. So, you know, it's possible that if everybody was there, that apparently all the other Jews just went along with the program. Doesn't say, so that leaves it up to us to speculate. It says, then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, gave the command to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I have set up? Now, if you are ready at the time that you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, and psaltery, and symphony with all kinds of music, and you fall down and worship the image which I have made, good. But if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? Of course, the obvious question to me is, where's Daniel? Where's Daniel at? You know. Well, you can only assume, because it doesn't give us the details. Since he was one of the officials, maybe he knew what was going on. You know, he saw this big statue and he knew what was coming next. And because he could, he was out on some kind of investigation or something in some other part of the province, and he either didn't get the word or ignored the word. So he wasn't there for this ceremony, dedication ceremony, because he's not mentioned. So he tells this to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and he says, so who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? Well, how soon? We forget. If we go back to chapter 2 and verse 47, the king answered Daniel and said, truly, your God is the God of gods and Lord of kings and a revealer of secrets, since you could reveal this secret. Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief administrator over all the wise men of Babylon. So he's in charge. He could come and go as he pleased. And Daniel petitioned the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel sat in the gate of the king. In other words, he was in the king's court. He had carte blanche. He could do what he wanted, go where he pleased, whenever he felt. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego just kind of, he did a favor for them, for Daniel, and he set them up over the province. So in verse 16, he says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. In other words, he says, we know what we know. We believe what we believe, and we can only act on that. What more do you want from us? The apostles were faced in a similar situation back in Acts chapter 4. Acts chapter 4 and in verse 18, and if you remember, it was Peter and John were in the temple at the hour of prayer, and they healed the lame man, and the whole place went wild, and the chief priests and the Pharisees officers of the temple, they didn't like it, so they grabbed him and threw him in jail. And then the high priest gets him out and questions him and, goes through the whole thing. I'll skip that whole story and go down to verse 18. So they called them, commanded them not to speak at all nor teach in the name of Jesus. But Peter and John answered and said to them, whether it is right in the sight of God to listen to you more than to God, you judge. For we cannot but speak the things which we have seen and heard. And that's the way it was with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They only knew what they knew. Their God, and the history of their God, and what they had done, and what they had studied. And they weren't going to change. And, especially at this time, now they're, in their mid-30s. I'm not changing now. I've been doing this all my life. Even for the last 19 years in captivity. So, chapter 5, then, in verse 29, again, it's kind of a similar situation takes place. Verse 29 says, but Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. And verse 32, and we are his witnesses to these things, and so also is the Holy Spirit, whom God has given to those who obey him. And when they heard this, they were furious and plotted to kill them. But then Gamaliel stepped in and said, well, don't do that. And he explained a few things to them. So down in verse 40, it says that when they agreed with him, and when they had called for the apostles and beaten them, they commanded them that they should not speak in the name of Jesus, and let them go. Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were already saved from death one time before, 19 years earlier in chapter 2, when the King Nebuchadnezzar was going to kill all the wise men. He sent out word to kill all the wise men, and Daniel says, what's going on? What's the rush? Why are you in this urgent haste to kill everyone? And it was their prayer and the answer about the dream that came to Daniel, and that Daniel gave to King Nebuchadnezzar, that saved them. So they were well aware that God had intervened already and saved them once. So why would you want to compromise that and go against what you already know? So they, again, are well aware that God can and did before and can again. But if he chooses not to, it doesn't change anything. We won't do it. And then the question for us is, can we take such a stand? Can we say no? Not going to do it. Well, they knew that's what they were in captivity for in the first place, because of idolatry. That's why Israel went out, and that's why Judah went into captivity, because of idolatry. And that's exactly what he wanted them to do, was to break the second commandment. You shall not bow down to them nor serve them. And what did he want them to do? Bow down and serve the idol that I have set up. No, we're not going to do it. We're just going to compound the problem. That's what we're in captivity for in the first place, because that's what our people were doing. The whole nation. So, that it just was that simple. They weren't going to do it. Well, of course, you can't look at this story without reading one verse in Revelation 13. Revelation 13 and verse 15 says, and he, that's the false prophet, was granted power to give life to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should even speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So, once again, at the end time, worship an image or be killed. The same situation. Will we be true to God like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who are our examples, or not? And the question you have to answer, you have to ask and look for an answer is how widespread will it be? And how will it be enforced? How did the people all over the Babylonian Empire hear the music and worship? Or was it a local event for the dignitaries? And then what? Was it only for the dedication ceremony? Or was this something that was going to be continued as we have, in the Middle East today, where they have the call to prayer with the music? And everybody's supposed to stop what they're doing and bow. So these are questions we don't really know, and we're going to find out when we get there. It's the same way with the image of the beast. How's it going to be enforced? Unless it's some kind of commanded gathering at certain times. How's anybody going to know if you're bowing down doing anything in your house? These are questions that you have to try and figure out. Now, back in Daniel, the image, the word image, means statue or sculpture. So it was some kind of carved image. In Revelation, the word image means image, likeness, or portrait. So there's a difference. And as we mentioned before, an image can be what's on a TV screen is an image or a likeness. Or it could be a portrait, which is basically what you have on your money. You pull out a dollar bill and there's a portrait of George Washington on it. So it remains to be seen exactly how all that's going to come to be. But the time is ahead of us, and we shall see. Back to Daniel chapter 3, verse 19. Then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed. Have you ever been in a conversation with someone, and you say something they don't like, and you see the change in their face? And, what happened? I didn't like that. What did I say? Well, that's the way it is. See, he was, friends as much as you can be with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because he had given them a lofty position as a favor to Daniel. And so he's saying, one hand washes the other. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. I asked you to do something for me, you're supposed to do it. And they just said, nope, not going to do it. And so the expression on his face changed toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke and commanded that they heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. So he just, he got all upset. Crank it up, heat it. So So, and he commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their trousers, their turbans, and other garments, and were cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And it shows you when you get angry that you don't think straight. He's going to heat the fiery furnace 7 times hotter than normal, and just to make sure they're uncomfortable, he's going to put hats and coats on them. You see, you just don't think. You're just so angry. People say, I'm beside myself, Well, yeah, he must have been, because he's, saying silly stuff. So, therefore, because the king's command was urgent and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So here he gets the mighty men of the army to tie them up and take them up there and throw them in. And as they get up there, the flame kills them. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fall down into the fire. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished. And he rose in haste and spoke, saying to his counselors, Did we not cast 3 men into the midst of the fire? And they answered and said to the king, True, O king. Well, look, he answered, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they're not hurt. And the form of the 4th is like a son of the gods. Look, do you see what I see? Am I seeing things or what? So, the question has been raised over the years about guardian angels. Do we have guardian angels? And the argument has been proposed in the past, no, because you see, there's only 1 angel there. If we had guardian angel, there should be 3, 1 for Shadrach, 1 for Meshach, 1 for Abednego. That's logic, except was it necessary? Well, if we look at Matthew chapter 18, Jesus tells us the answer. Matthew chapter 18 and verse 10. He says, Take heed that you do not despise one of these little ones. For I say to you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. That sounds to me like we have guardian angels. Their angels always see the face of my Father, plural. So I would say the answer to that is yes. So let's go back to Psalm 91. Psalm 91. And verse 1. It says, He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in Him I will trust. Can we put our name there? You put us into the, not David or someone else saying the psalm, but us. He is my God, my refuge, my fortress. I will trust in Him. Surely He shall deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the perilous pestilence. He shall cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you shall take refuge. His truth shall be your shield and buckler. His truth is your shield. The truth, the understanding, the knowledge that you have, the rest of the world doesn't have. You're planning on keeping the New Covenant Memorial Passover service tomorrow. Everybody else is planning on keeping Palm Sunday. They don't have a clue. They don't understand. They don't know. His truth is your shield and buckler. You shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day, nor of the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor of the destruction that lays waste at noonday. Morning, evening, afternoon, at night, doesn't matter. 1,000 may fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. Only with your eyes you shall look and see the reward of the wicked. How near did it come to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? They were in it. They were in the fire, but it didn't touch them. Didn't touch them. We think of all the horrors that will happen during the tribulation. But he tells us here, don't be afraid. Why? Because you are in God. You are in God and God is in you. Verse 9, because you have made the Lord, who is my refuge, even the Most High, your dwelling place. What did Jesus tell us in John 14? If you love me, you keep my commandments, and my Father and I will come and make our home with you. I and you, you and me, I and him. That's our dwelling place, is God. Don't be afraid, because you, the real you, the you that counts, the one that's going to go on for eternity, is in God. He's your dwelling place. No evil shall befall you, nor shall any plague come near your dwelling. For he shall give his angels charge over you to keep you in all your ways. In their hands they shall bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone. You shall tread upon the lion and the cobra, the young lion and the serpent you shall trample underfoot. It sounds like he's given his angels charge over you. It sounds like you're going to have a guardian angel. One verse, if you want to hold your place, I'm going to go back to Hebrews chapter 1 for one verse. Hebrews chapter 1, and verse 13. It says, to which of the angels has he ever said, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool? And of course the answer is none. I never did say that to the angels. Are they not all ministering spirits sent forth to minister for those who will inherit salvation? Sound like guardian angels? Ministering spirits, ministering angels sent forth to minister to who? Those who shall obtain salvation. Inherit salvation, which is what we have. We already have the down payment. It's my own conclusion, my own feelings of, I think that's the reason why Satan rebelled. When you look at Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14 and you put everything together, he was the cherub that covers. He was right over the throne of God. So he was privy to the whole plan of the creation of man. And what was the end result of the creation of man? We're going to create man in our image, a physical prototype with a spirit, and we're going to give them our spirit, and eventually they're going to be able to be born into our family and be one of us. And instead of just two of us, there's going to be billions. Satan heard that and said, wait a minute, I'm number one. You mean I'm going to be 20 billion and one? They're all going to be above us? And we're going to be babysitters? And it says, and he did what? He was trafficking, spreading rumors. He went to his third of the angels and he let them know what was going to go on, what was happening. And in his mind, he says, no, I will ascend. I will be like the Most High, not all these people. Well, I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen. And the rebellion took place and they destroyed the earth, and God had to come back and recreate it and do the whole thing. And Satan was there every step of the way trying to mess it up. And he's still here trying to mess it up. Because he says, no, me, I'm going to do it. And God says, no, you're not. I already made the plan. That's why he hates you. He's not number one. That's why he still goes up to heaven. He said, do you see what he did? See what he did? He's not as good as me. I'm better than that. And I'm pretty too. That's what it says. He was beautiful. The most perfect thing ever created, right? Yeah. His ego, his pride brought him down. He couldn't handle it. Back in Psalm 92, then in verse 14, he says, because he has set his love upon me, because therefore I will deliver him. I will set him on high because he has known my name. And, you know, it's a good thing to know. It's a good thing to know God's name, the Father and the Son. They're your family. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. This is something that Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego knew. They knew the Psalms. They were brought up in the temple. They were part of the royal family. They were royalty. They knew they had access to the scriptures. This is what they were learning. These are the things they were counting on when they fell into trouble. And they had the history. We go back to just read a few verses as a reminder of what is taking place. What, at this time of the year, way back when. Exodus chapter 8. Exodus chapter 8 and verse 20. And the Lord said to Moses, rise early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh as he comes out to the water, and say to him, thus says the Lord, let my people go, that they may serve me. Or else if you will not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies on you and your servants, on your people, and into your houses. The houses of the Egyptians will be full of swarms of flies, and also the ground on which they stand. And in that day I will set apart the land of Goshen, in which my people dwell, that no swarms of flies shall be there, in order that you may know that I am the Lord in the midst of the land. I will make a difference between my people and your people. Tomorrow this sign shall be. And the Lord did so. Thick swarms of flies came into the house of Pharaoh, into his servants' houses, and into all the land of Egypt. The land was corrupted because of the swarm of flies. Chapter 9, verse 4. And the Lord said, I will make a difference between the livestock of Israel and the livestock of Egypt, so nothing shall die of all that belongs to the children of Israel. Children of Israel. And then in verse 25, he says, and the hail struck throughout the whole land of Egypt, all that was in the field, both man and beast, and the hail struck every herb of the field and broke every tree in the field. Only in the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel were, there was no hail. And then chapter 10 and verse 1, it says, and the Lord said to Moses, go into Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his servants, that I may show these signs before him, and that you may tell in the hearing of your son and your son's son the mighty things that I have done in Egypt, and my signs which I have done among them, that you may know that I am the Lord. See, up till now, he's been doing all these things to show Pharaoh and the Egyptians who he was. Now he says, I want you to know this, to tell your sons and your sons' sons, your children, your grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren, that you may know who I am. And verse 22, he says, so Moses stretched out his hand toward heaven, and there was thick darkness in the land of Egypt 3 days. They did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days. But all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. And then in chapter 11 and verse 4, he says, and Moses said, thus says the Lord, about midnight I will go out to the land in the midst of Egypt. All the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the female servant who is behind the handmill, and all the firstborn of the animals. Then there shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as what not since it before, nor shall it be like it again. But against none of the children of Israel shall a dog move its tongue against man or beast, that you may know that the Lord does make a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. So, back to Daniel chapter 3. These were the things, that they had in their mind, that they counted on. These things that they learned and studied. Because remember, they were only teenagers when they went into captivity. And it was the first time as teenagers that God intervened and saved them. Because God answered their prayer. Which just reinforced. That's how they were building faith. So, back in Daniel chapter 3 and verse 26, he sees the four of them walking around in the fire loose. And Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the midst of the fire. See, they didn't come running out the minute they were free. The minute their bonds, the ropes, or whatever they were tied up with, whenever they were free from their bonds, they didn't come running out. They stayed there in the fire, walking around. Fire didn't bother them one bit. The angel was protecting them. They just stayed there walking around until the king told them to come out. Because there was no need to do anything until the king gave them the next command. And that way the king realized, well, they still do what I say. Because he could have imagined the four of them coming out and taking over the place. I mean, he's the one that said, who's going to deliver you from my hand? Next. There you go. So, they stayed there until he told them to come out. Verse 27, and the satraps, the administrators, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together, and they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power, and the hair of their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of fire was not on them. So all the dignitaries, all the officials were there, and they all saw it. They were all witnesses. And it was almost like Nebuchadnezzar had to eat crow. Who's going to deliver you from my hand? Oh, him. In verse 28, Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. And they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this. So you can only imagine that all the other Jews, could they now try and get in behind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and say, yeah, I'm one of those too, or as he say, wait a minute, you bowed down to my idol. What are you trying to say? Well, so after 19 years, Nebuchadnezzar had to say, I knew their God was great at dreams, but this is impossible. And yet, it happened. He saw it. They all saw it. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. See, back before, he promoted Daniel because Daniel did something that was impossible. He told him his dream and the interpretation that nobody else could do. So he promoted Daniel, and Daniel petitioned the king to help his three friends. And now, the king Nebuchadnezzar promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego based on their own actions and their own merits. They frustrated the king's word. They said, nope, not going to do it. You do whatever you're going to do. And so they did. And God protected them. So in closing, let's go over to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11. Of course, it starts out talking about Moses and as they left the land of Egypt and they went through the Red Sea and they were all baptized into Moses in the cloud and the sea. And down in verse 11, it says, now all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. These things were written, a lot of them dealing with Moses, were written for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. For them. For examples for them. And then we add Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and all these other stories which are written for examples for us. The apostles and all of it. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego only went up to part of the Bible. There's still a lot to be written yet, which is even more examples for us to follow, including the example of Christ himself as to what to do, what not to do. Us upon whom the ends of the ages have come, because we're a lot closer to the end of the age than what they were. We're 2,000 years closer. Therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed, lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you except such as common to man, but God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. Well, their escape was to obey God rather than man. As we look to the future, to the beast and his image, we need to look to the past and to these examples. That's what they're here for. For examples for us, to know what to do. Can we trust in God as they did and follow their examples? And as I said, we need to remember that the truth, the understanding that we have, the world doesn't have. They don't know, and they can't know, any more than we could have known it until God opened our mind and called us. There's no way that we can know and understand on our own. All the things God has done for us, you have to go back in your own mind and through your own life and think of all the things that God has done for you and the times that he's intervened in your life. And remind us that he has and still can. But even if he chooses not to, we will remain true to him and his word. You know, I have to read something here that just have to kind of remember as you go through the examples of what they went through. And, you know, put yourself in their shoes and say, you know, can I do that? Am I at that point yet where I can do it? Can I remain true to him and his word? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were faithful servants of the king for 19 years at this point, but he turned on them in an instant. Just when they said no, that was, you know, he got angry to where he didn't think straight. They told him basically, you know what we're all about. There's no need to discuss it. It's not going to happen. We never have and never will worship anyone other than our God. That's it. End of discussion. Do what you're going to do. God's either going to protect me or he's not. Doesn't matter. Not going to do it. That's it. It's up to God. So the question, again, is, can we and will we take such a stand?